Welcome back, everyone. This is Right Now. Despite some gridlock in Washington, a bipartisan housing affordability bill is now law. Experts are calling it one of the biggest housing reform bills in decades. News 8 State Matters political reporter Jenny Hubb breaks down what it could mean for you.
The bill passed Congress with bipartisan support, but President Trump never signed it. And because he took no action, the 21st Century Road to Housing Act became the law. Now Governor Newsom is weighing in while facing questions about a housing promise he made during his January State of the State address. In January, Newsom promised more oversight and enforcement of corporations buying up single-family homes and turning them into rentals. It's an issue where Newsom and President Trump actually agree, arguing corporate buyers are leaving fewer homes for families and first-time buyers. But there hasn't been action since Newsom's speech, and a legislative effort by Democratic Assemblymember Alex Lee to ban corporations from buying more than 1,000 single-family homes just died in committee. Any updates on that promise?
Yeah, there's been a lot of us are promoting that. The good news is, remarkably, the president may not be familiar because he didn't take the time to sign a bill, that what we were promoting, and by the way, take a look at that housing bill that was done federally, looks a lot like what we've been doing here in the state of California. In so many ways, it neuters the need, not completely, but substantially, for the state of California to move forward. That said, there are a number of bills and discussions and amendments that are in play.
Newsom now relying heavily on the federal effort, which bans corporations with 350 homes from buying more, though it does exempt build-to-rent projects. As for how the rest of the bill may affect California, housing experts say only time will tell.
They don't exactly take effect immediately. What they do is they direct federal agencies to write new rules and grant guidelines. I think it's a helpful layer on top of what California has been doing, continues to do. But my assessment is that what goes on in Sacramento and what goes on in counties and cities across California is ultimately going to matter a lot more.
Alan Berube says while there's not much new funding, the federal bill does expand on state and local efforts, including streamlining permitting and new incentives to build more. Jenny Hutt, News 8.
All right, and you'll see that Jenny Hudd now joins us live here from Sacramento in the newsroom there. Jenny, thank you so much for joining us here on this Friday. I think it's a very interesting discussion, not only because of the drama of President Trump. There was going to be the whole signing ceremony. It didn't happen and so forth. But you even just take a look at what many experts say will happen with this bill. It's being hyped up because of its bipartisan nature, but it does very much focus on a lot of the red tape issues, which may not be a sort of, big news for some people. So what are you hearing from housing experts here in California about how immediate will we see even any type of, progress, if you will, because of this?
Alan Berube, whom you just heard from, he's actually San Diego based, I should also know. So there's that local tie. But I mean, he's saying, quite frankly, it could take 6 to 12 months. So again, this passed at the federal level. Yes, it's a federal bipartisan housing bill to attempt to make affordable housing a more prominent thing nationwide. But ultimately, there are those red tape, right? There's red tape and there's various environmental regulations and permitting regulations at the local and state levels as well. So even if this comes down federally, it's up to states like California and ultimately local jurisdictions like Sacramento, San Diego, etc., to then look at their local jurisdiction and their local kind of compliance rules for building and constructing housing and see how that can then be applied. So there's kind of a lot remain to be answered.
We know that for a lot of housing experts, they've pointed to CEQA as being a major roadblock in the sort of modern day efforts to build housing. Also, the way that California, people are very sometimes flabbergasted to find out that there are town boards like within cities that have and wield huge power when it comes to developments and so forth, or at least giving stamps of approval. Are you aware of any impact, at least we'll just cover CEQA, that this federal bill has on a state's own environmental review efforts?
I think, again, that really remains to be seen because as Governor Newsom noted, the first half of his answer to my question actually wasn't about the corporations buying up single family homes, but rather what the federal bill does. And also at that at that press conference, he really complimented the federal bill and was saying, what it does is good, but at the same time, California has for years at this point already been eliminating some of that red tape and trying to streamline the permitting process and the construction process. And so, again, California, compared to other states and even the federal environmental regulation, which is called NEQA, right? We're a bit stricter when it comes to environmental review and environmental standards. So again, I really no one has the exact answer right now as to how that federal bill will ultimately trickle down and affect California as well as other states. But what a lot of legislative leaders and Governor Newsom are boasting right now is that California has for many years already tackled our CEQA problem and the various complaints and kind of loopholes that folks have pointed out with CEQA and how it delays a lot of that construction process here in the state.
Yeah, that's been a years-long effort, and there's been a lot of reporting, especially from California lawmakers, that have highlighted in detail the successes and, in some cases, most notably, the failures of that process, the trial and error. So this is something that a lot of people are welcoming. Are we hearing some more about what the next steps are? They say it's about 12 months to hear some of the effects. If you're talking to a lawmaker right now, an assembly maker, a state senator, what's the next issue that they're looking at going forward?
I think they'd express hope with this federal housing bill, but again, until we see, for example, how much funding we might get, and I should note the federal housing bill doesn't necessarily set aside additional funding. It's, again, more so the concept of eliminating some of that red tape or additional hurdles. There's a lot of money involved in the bill. So I think many legislative leaders, as Newsom has already emphasized, would express hope. But here in California, I mean, we have multiple housing bond measures that are going to be on the November ballot. The Veterans Affordable Housing Bill, that's the $11.25 billion housing bill that I've reported on and that you guys have covered as well. Yeah. That is going to be available for voters to vote on come November. Also, another bond that would essentially help the missing middle, right? Missing middle-class Americans putting down a down payment, an affordable down payment to get through that first step in buying a home. Voters can also weigh in on that bond measure come November. So a lot of local efforts on housing affordability going on here in California.
Okay, we're going to switch gears here. Still include the state of California. The Governor Gavin Newsom, has already been a main character here in this conversation, has reacted to President Trump's primetime address, in which, again, a lot of conspiracy theories and claims about the 2020 election and the election process here in the state. In the USA. In particular, we know he's made a number of comments about California in the past. What was Governor Gavin Newsom's reaction to this primetime address?
Specifically, where California was mentioned was when President Trump said the Department of Homeland Security found hundreds of thousands of non-citizen voters allegedly on states' voter rolls, one of them including California. And so that is a context in which California was brought up in yesterday's address by the president. The governor immediately reacting, as you said, he hasn't been shy to stand up against the Trump administration on various fronts, right? Obviously with Proposition 50 as well. So last night, Newsom had very strong pushback. He called the whole speech quote unquote ramblings of a mad king. He also posted a video saying this is a 25th Amendment moment. And the 25th Amendment establishes that line of succession for the president in the case that the president is incompetent or unable to carry out his presidential duties. And so he's really emphasizing essentially that President Trump is not fit for office. And again, he's heavily criticizing this speech and saying, it undermines election integrity and that it's not evidence or fact-based. And that latter part, experts too have agreed. The documents the White House revealed and the evidence that the Trump administration has provided simply is not sufficient to back the many claims that he made during that primetime address.
Yeah, one of the things we were talking about was that the system in which they determine those unverified citizens, and oftentimes it's the states who have to do an audit themselves on it to see if perhaps that is overstated, which experts oftentimes says it does. Now, on the basis of the elections as well, and of the way that California does it specifically, despite Governor Newsom's critiques at what President Trump had said there, both him have maybe shared to some extent some middle ground in terms of how California runs their elections. President Trump has always been very critical of how California runs it, especially in the context of those LA mayoral races. Governor Newsom was very adamant prior to those primaries to try to get the counties here in the state to try to expedite that process as much as possible. Oftentimes it was not as successful as perhaps maybe he would have wanted it. Are we seeing any traction there going into the general election in November?
the governor, as part of his promise in the final budget deal, did actually secure a little over $40 million to go to local county elections officials. So that's for various purposes: voter outreach, voter education, also to help some local governments get more election related equipment. So about $40 million more dedicated for that purpose. And as you've noted, the president and the governor have been aligned in frustrations over how long it does take in California to count all those ballots and certify election results. But you ask the Secretary of State, you ask Governor Newsom, you ask other Democratic leaders, they say, yes, they agree it's frustrating, but they're not going to compromise. Potentially disenfranchising voters and risking accuracy for the sake of being quicker and pacifying some of those concerns that are being communicated at the federal level. So, as far as we know, even heading into November, that flexibility we allow, right, up to 7 days after Election Day, your vote by mail ballot can still be received and counted as long as it was postmarked by Election Day. Various flexibilities like that California really, really values. We're going to see that for the near future.
Okay. All right. Well, Jenny, thank you so much for joining us here on this Friday. Have a good weekend as always, and we'll check back in with you next Friday here on Right Now.